you had to choose between the fate of the world and the fate of the person who you love the most, which would you choose? We already know your answer, Joel. If you clicked on this video, there's a good chance you probably already know yours as well. I definitely know mine. But you know who we haven't asked? We haven't asked my old buddy Jon Stewart. Hey John, old pal, would you prioritize the fate of the world or the fate of your daughter if you had to choose? Huh. Well, it actually looks like John isn't in the best of shape to answer questions at this point in time. But luckily, he was a famous moral philosopher, so we could pretty much find his answer on his Wikipedia page. Actions are right in proportion as they promote happiness. Wrong as they produce the reverse. This is John Stuart Mill's utilitarian moral philosophy. Essentially, you're looking to maximize the good and minimize the suffering for as many people as possible. Which sounds pretty easy and straightforward, until you realize the personal sacrifices that you might have to make in order to see it through. I don't think that this is a perspective that many people share, but I personally view utilitarianism as a pretty strong way to conceptualize morality. The Last of Us Part 2 had a story that really resonated with me because it showed the harsh reality and dire consequences of prioritizing your own emotions over the greater good. Both Ellie and Abby's revenge quests demonstrate a failure to live up to utilitarian moral standards. But I'm not here to preach to you about utilitarianism. Sure, it's a philosophy that could have been used to avert a lot of the death in the game, but so is the Fifth Commandment, the Jedi Code, the categorical imperative. Most standards of morality advocate against unregulated homicidal vendettas. The Last of Us Part 2 believably demonstrated how hard it can be to do what's right, even if you know what the right thing is. It challenged my moral standards, even though the game seems to agree with mine. So I can understand why some people got upset about the events in the game. But for me, from my perspective, the eventual forgiveness and healing that both protagonists at least begin to undertake completes a vital message about dealing with loss and anger that I do not think should be brushed aside. And it portrays this message in the most brutal, believable, and delicately written way that I can imagine. In this video, we'll be using The Last of Us Part 2 to help us understand the immense difficulty of achieving forgiveness, but its immense power provided that it can be attained. Also, I like the game a lot, so I also kind of want to say some positive things about it. If Jon Stuart Mill, the quintessential utilitarian himself, found himself in the positions of, say, Joel at the end of the first game, or Ellie at the start of the second game, even Abby during the part with her dad, it's easy to see that he may not have been able to muster his desired selflessness. I'm nearly certain that this is an unpopular opinion, but I reluctantly and respectfully disagree with Joel's decision at the end of the first Last of Us. I understand that Ellie's life is not something that would ever be easy to throw away, but you're telling me that in exchange for untold potential for cure and human prosperity, perhaps a rebirth of civilization itself, provided that the cure was used to the greatest effect, or even if you could just end the suffering of a few dozen people's lives, I don't see how you can weigh these two options and come out of it telling me that Ellie's life is more valuable. The numbers just don't add up. I can see why you'd make the choice Joel did, but I still think it's the wrong one. But in The Last of Us 2, this scene got to me.
Please stop! Please don't do this! Joel, please get up!
When I started this game, I was entirely on board with Ellie's quest for revenge. At this point, it was not a matter of right or wrong. Ellie knows what she's doing is wrong. She sang an entire song about it before the game even came out.
But I can't walk on the path of the right because I'm wrong.
No, our vendetta in the name of Joel had been incited by hate, and no one, not Kant, Stuart Mill, or Socrates, could have created a moral philosophy to override those emotions. Hot on the anger I felt from Joel's death, the first few encounters with wolves in this game were insane. I had never wanted to hurt the enemies I was facing in a video game as much as I did here. I didn't even care that it was more gruesome and humanized combat that I had ever experienced before. I was on board with all of the terrible things that Ellie was doing, even as they got more and more intense. By the time we got to this cliffhanger, where Abby tracks Ellie down to exact revenge for the death of her friends, and we start playing as Abby, yeah, I understood that what Ellie had been doing was wrong. This line had really resonated with me.
We let you both live. and you wasted it.
But I still wanted Ellie to succeed. I felt it was unfair that she had been dragged into the repercussions of Joel's actions, which she had no part in. And despite these events that start to humanize Abby, yeah, I still didn't sympathize with her either. But something was happening to Abby that, like it or not, I could not deny. She was gradually coming to peace with her past. Joel's death had not put her nightmares about her father to rest. That only came as she went out of her way to do things for other people. Just like vengeance is not what brought Ellie peace. I've heard some complaints that Naughty Dog's attempt to humanize Abby did not succeed, but I never saw that that's what they were trying to do anyway. Because since we don't sympathize with Abby, it becomes really interesting when it gets hard to deny that by the time she's faced all of her fears, sacrificed a lot to do good things for innocent people, and ultimately spared Ellie and Dina, she is no longer the same person who killed Joel. I still didn't like her, but whether I liked her or not, and whether she deserved it or not, Abby had learned to forgive herself, and for that reason, she was at peace, even a little bit happy as she explored Santa Barbara with Lev. Ellie, on the other hand,
Ellie? Hey, Ellie.
Ellie had not learned to forgive. And this isn't necessarily something you can entirely blame her for. Abby was lucky that she ran into these kids to protect. Without that, I don't really know how she would have that kind of redemption and be able to do good things to make up for what she's done in this infected, war-torn world. Even though it was another act of selfishness, and even though it did cost her, Ellie had to go to Santa Barbara because the death of Joel was something that she had not come to terms with. And again, she can't come to terms with it through revenge. She definitely felt conflicted about some of her more brutal actions against the wolves, and we've already seen that killing Joel left a bad taste in most of Abby's friends' mouths, and it did not lay Abby's demons to rest. The whole thing about an eye for an eye sounds great in principle, like, yeah, we'll just murder this Joel guy and we can all call it even. That's why they let Ellie and Tommy live. But historically speaking, vengeance does not work like it's some kind of economic transaction. You aggravate strong emotions, and you cause your enemies to loosen their grip on their moral standards for themselves. So what may be championed as an act of justice actually ends up snowballing it into an unnecessarily greater conflict. No. Ellie had to learn how to forgive. And masterfully, beautifully, in a way that simultaneously ties up the conflict that started at the end of the first game. It happens because she forgives Joel.
I don't think I can ever forgive you for that. But I would like to try.
This scene by the boats, its importance signified by the fact that this is the title screen, is the reason why I think that The Last of Us 2 is one of the best stories I've ever experienced. Definitely the best in a video game. Never in a game before have I died to a boss because I did not want to hurt the person that I was fighting. This happened twice in The Last of Us 2, and it was such an interesting conflict both times. The first time when Abby confronted Ellie and you had to play as Abby fighting Ellie, I was really reluctant to even try to win that fight. I was reluctantly pressing square in like this QuickTime event, and I eventually had to, after failing it a lot of times, I had to say, okay, I want to finish this game. I have to actually try now. And it was insanely crazy that it was not only like challenging in the gameplay to win that fight, but in your emotions, it was challenging to actually bring yourself to want to win that fight. The second time it happened was this scene by the boats. By this point, I did have some respect for Abby. Maybe even a little sympathy given her, beat up state. Definitely had sympathy for Lev. If Ellie killed Abby, I can only imagine what The Last of Us 3 would be like. It'd be pretty much the same game. But mostly, I knew that Ellie could never have come to peace with herself unless she learned to let this vendetta go. And she did. It took a while, and it would probably have taken any of us at least as long. But at the end of the day, she escapes with her life, most of her friends' lives, and hopefully something like a future that's a little less violent. It's beyond difficult to just have a utilitarian or a logical view on everything and instantly forgive people for their transgressions, especially for ones like these. But The Last of Us 2, in the most brutally honest and masterfully crafted way, demonstrates the dire cost of not finding a way to forgive yourself and others for the inevitably gruesome and difficult things that continuously happen in the world. This really hit home for me in the final scene, where we learn that Even though Ellie may have a chance at some peace of mind, and even though she got to have an excellent vacation in Seattle, her music, the thing that provided her with the only moments of peace and levity amidst this brutal adventure, will forever be hindered as a price for her hatred. I'm not saying it's fair, don't think you can expect a realistic story to be fair, but these powerful explorations of themes of revenge and forgiveness were handled nearly perfectly, in my opinion. And I'm not just going to say that without backing it up. In the first hour of the game, Ellie is asked to forgive a guy named Seth for what we later find out was an embarrassing and insulting encounter. Ellie is reluctant to forgive the guy for even this little thing.
I don't want to hear what that bigot has to say.
So before Joel even dies, we've already started exploring the themes in the story. Even minor things like the collectibles are used for a narrative purpose. I mean, think about it. Realistically, all of these environments, or at least most of them, probably have both coins and trading cards scattered throughout them. But Ellie only finds cards and Abby only finds coins because they're different people and they have different interests. Despite their paralleled stories, they each have to learn their lesson in a different way. It's that kind of nuance that permeates throughout the acting and delivery as well. When Ellie calls out Abby's name in Santa Barbara, you can already tell that she isn't really crying out of anger anymore.
Abby?
Yes, it's in desperation, but it's more like she actually needs to see Abby again to have closure. And you get a subtle sense of that delivery that maybe she isn't going to want to kill her. Maybe. But I guess since it's unrealistic for Joel to have fallen for this obvious trap in the opening hours, Naughty Dog has terrible writers, and I gotta give it a 0. I'm not trying to tell you that you have to like the game. It's definitely going to be too violent and gruesome for a lot of people. There were certain parts where I did not like what I was seeing. But for me, and this might just be for me, the relatively hopeful ending definitely hit home with my experience and philosophy, all while looking great and having incredibly fun and engaging gameplay that's almost universally relevant to the story. I give Tiger Woods PGA Tour 13 a 5 out of 5.
Best ever had.